Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, I hope I can say, friends and colleagues, I might go so far. I've heard that some of you are receiving extra credit for being here tonight. I love it, I support it, get their points, but I will say anybody who's been told by their professor that they have to be here, and if they're being forced to be here, I invite you to leave. You are free to go. I don't like speaking to a captive audience. I think we're good. I think everybody stayed. Okay. All right. So I'm here to talk to you a little bit tonight about education. I own a private education company called Academic Advantage, previously TLC Tutoring Company. We're one of the largest providers of supplemental academic services in the state to both school districts and individuals. And interestingly enough, as a private company, we have what I would call the power or the right to do what Ron was asking us to do earlier, which is listen to teachers. Actually, listen to teachers, listen to students, give them what they're asking for as opposed to what is coming from the top down. And so that's what I'm going to be here to talk to you tonight. Now, the first question I want to ask you is I want you to imagine a small child born this year, right? Like if you guys hear my son crying up there, I want you to imagine what life will look like for him several decades from now. So my son was born in 2022. In the year 2050, he'll be 28 years old, right? What can we teach that child to make sure that they are prepared for the job market of the year 2050, okay? What are we teaching that kid right now, and how can we do better? So the first thing that I want to talk about is what I see largely as the problem. Now, people have seen the statistics. Everybody knows that fourth graders can't read, that people who are graduating from high school are not literate in the way that they need to be. They're not testing on level, right? We even have some who would go so far as to say that the education system is a waste of time and money, like Professor Kaplan, who wrote this book up here. Now, when I look at the problem of education, I always think about what we're learning for the future. And so I think to myself, if I was a Martian and I came down to Earth and I was trying to figure out what does our job market look like, would I be able to do that by going to a high school right now and looking at the curriculum? Okay, so I'm looking through the curriculum and I'm thinking to myself, well, I guess that there are a lot of translators walking around there, but only nominal translators. They only need a couple of years of Spanish, and I guess there's a big market for literary criticism, and I guess that the average worker needs to just figure out quadratic equations in their day-to-day life, or figure out if a triangle is congruent. Now, I think all of us in here know and remember that they spent hours and hours toiling in a classroom, learning things that they have now certainly forgotten, right? Most humans lose knowledge that they rarely use. And so when we look at the system of education right now, we have an enormous waste of resources and opportunity costs when we're forcing students to learn things that they're not interested in, that they will not remember. Now, you might be saying to yourself, right, my mom's a teacher, I argue with her all the time about this, right, is that it's the experience. You're learning to think critically, you're learning to communicate or collaborate, but of course, those are things we can teach as well, right? Those are actually discrete skills that can be taught in a classroom, and the question is, do people actually know about these subjects? And the answers are abysmal. If you ask Americans, what is bigger, an electron or an atom? Less than 50% of Americans can get that question right. Less than 50% of Americans can name the three branches of government. So if your hope is that we are raising our society to a minimum level of literacy on these subjects, I don't think that we are. And if you know half of the letters of the alphabet, we don't call you half literate, we call you illiterate. And I think the same is true about basic facts in science and history. If you do not know most of science or most of history in terms of what the real story is, then you are not half literate in biology, you are illiterate. You do not understand that subject. And the system of education we have right now does not raise students to be literate in those subjects. So the solutions. My first solution, and the solution that we use at Academic Advantage, is more time and less structure. Now, the American education system, if some of you are parents out there, you'll know. I have to take my kid at 7:30 in the morning. I have to pick them up at 3. These times are centered around a bygone era where most households had one parent in the house. Now, there are many households in the United States where you have a single parent trying to raise kids, but even in households like mine with 2 parents, my wife and I both work. My wife's an attorney. She's actually much more important than I am. And so we don't have time to pick our kids up at 3 all the time. We don't have childcare in the summers. We don't have childcare until our child is 5. There are all these things that we don't do in the United States that other countries have started taking moves to do, with the understanding that this is all time for students to learn and to interact with one another. Now, the other side of this comes down to structure. What are we actually teaching kids? Like I said earlier, we're spending a lot of time teaching kids discrete skills that sometimes they forget, but many times will not be useful in the job market of tomorrow. So I went to an elementary school recently, and they were very proud of their EAST program. I think they are doing great things there. But they were telling me about how they're teaching kids to code in C++. Right, that's the type of thing that gets everybody excited, right? You hear about kids, they're doing something technological. It's a challenging thing they're doing, and we think, okay, that's probably great. Now, my question is, will humans still be coding in 20 years? Some of you have used ChatGPT. You type me a 500-word essay about confidentiality law in Arkansas. The future is that AI will be programming. AI will be driving trucks. AI will be doing many of the things that we now consider to be important jobs. And the question is, are we actually preparing students for that future? Now, many education experts, and what we do in our company, is we suggest that students focus more on what we call the 4 C's. The 4 C's are much more general life skills: communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and creativity, that actually can be worked on as skills themselves. And of course, you can learn about critical thinking by forcing yourself through trigonometry, but less than 4% of Americans get a degree in math or science at any time, right? So it is very unlikely that the vast majority of students will, again, ever need to go back and check and see if a triangle is congruent or use this information. And again, that is an enormous opportunity cost. We are wasting those students' time. The next point I say is bottoms up. Ron said when he was out here, what did he say? Listen to a teacher, right? Now, that's a problem in our society, is that we don't listen to students or teachers nearly enough when it comes to how we are actually implementing our academic policies. Right now, you have congressmen, frankly, at the top, most of whom have never been in a classroom since they themselves were a pupil in one. And then underneath that, you have administrators who themselves have been removed from the classroom for many years. And far, far down the list, you have students with no power and teachers with next to none. And I think that needs to be completely reversed. The reason that our company has found success is because we listen to students, we listen to teachers, we meet them where they are, and we turn learning into what I believe it actually is supposed to be, which is a democratic process, a grassroots process, a subversive process. It is one that is centered around communication and learning in a collaborative way, not learning by force. All of us remember those times that we were sitting in the classroom where we were just essentially being forced to learn information that we didn't want to learn and that we don't remember now. And my last solution is that we have to be willing to knock over sacred cows. Some of you may have heard this expression before. There are many sacred cows in the field of education. That's actually my daughter, and her cow, Isabella, right there, if it ever goes up. Oh, there we go. And knocking over sacred cows is a process by which we challenge pervasive assumptions. It could be the author that you've become attached to in terms of how you teach reading. Recently in the United States, there has been an upheaval where we're moving back to phonics instead of whole word or whole meaning reading, which has been promoted for years by authors like Lucy Calkins. And we've seen that this isn't working. This isn't working for the vast majority of students. We have students who are falling through the cracks, both students who are struggling and students who are simply bored or stultified. Now, it was talked about in the beginning before I came out here, but it's true. I know the organizer for this event, Adam Key, because in high school, I became the first and only high schooler to ever win a collegiate debate national championship. But I also almost didn't graduate that year due to truancy, right? It is a struggle for high school students who, on the one side, they have their attention span being whittled down by social media and all the technological pressures. And on the other side, we have a school system that is not responding by becoming more pliable and more respondent to the students and their actual needs. And I think that this is a problem. Now, my last point here is that the heat is on. We have real problems in our society. In debate, we like to terminalize impacts. We like to talk about how bad this could get, right? This is going to make climate change much worse, or this is going to lead to a land war in Europe, which is something we used to think couldn't happen in this century. But we have real problems that we are dealing with, and many of those problems are not problems that our generation, especially my generation, are equipped to handle or equipped to solve. These are simply problems that we are going to pass along down the road to our children and grandchildren. And we are right now making the decisions about if we are preparing or failing to prepare the children, future adults, who will someday have to solve these problems, who will have to decide whether or not we can all continue organized human existence on this planet. There are real problems around technological development and our failure to keep up with those problems of technological development in our education system. So my advice to the people in power, the congressmen, the administrators, think about your own relationship to education, especially legislators, state legislators in Arkansas, if you're watching this. Please think about education and where it ranks in your priorities, and consider if you have an appropriate relationship to teachers and students. Are you getting the feedback from those people who actually are on the ground doing the process of education? To teachers, I encourage you to keep going. I know that it is a struggle. I know that it is harder than it has ever been before, but I encourage you to keep going. And to students, my one piece of advice is this: don't listen to me too much. Don't listen to the adults, right? We don't understand the world. The world is changing faster than we can keep up with it. And more, you will not be able to determine if what you're hearing is timeless wisdom or outdated bias. Be critical, ask questions for yourself, take your learning into your own hands. Thank you very much.